The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of jagged rocks and swirling red dust. In the distance, massive shapes cast shadows taller than any building the boy had ever seen. He crouched behind a boulder, heart hammering in his chest, peering through the haze. They were dragons, alien dragons, scales glinting like molten metal, wings spanning wider than a house, eyes glowing with an intelligence that made him feel small and insignificant. He was just a boy. An orphan. A nothing. The dragons laughed, or at least it sounded like laughter, a deep, resonant rumble that shook the ground. One of them curled its neck, eyeing him like a curious predator examining a flea. "Why are you here, human?" Its mind spoke directly to him, a thought so loud it rattled his skull. The boy swallowed. He had no answer. Every step forward seemed impossible, yet something inside him urged him closer. Curiosity. Fear. Maybe a spark of defiance. Then, one of the dragons flared its wings, sending a gust of wind that threatened to knock him off his feet. The others leaned in, silent but menacing, waiting, watching, daring him to retreat. And for a moment, he thought he might. But he didn't. He stepped forward, tiny against the titans, and fixed his gaze on the largest dragon, whose eyes burned with the weight of centuries. He didn't know if he'd survive this encounter. He didn't know if he even deserved to. But something told him, this was the moment everything would change. The air was thick with heat and the metallic scent of the dragon's lair. The boy's small frame felt fragile against the shadows of the immense creatures surrounding him. Every beat of his heart echoed like a drum in the cavernous valley, every breath a small rebellion against the fear threatening to paralyze him. He had stepped forward, defiant, but now the reality of their scrutiny pressed down like the weight of 1,000 storms. The largest dragon, scales shimmering in hues of molten gold and deep crimson, lowered its head until its snout hovered just above the boy's shoulders. Its eyes, glowing coals of ancient wisdom, examined him as though reading the secrets of his soul. A voice, not spoken aloud but pressed directly into his mind, reverberated like a thunderclap. "Why do you persist, human? Do you know what waits for those who falter?" The boy swallowed, dry throat rasping. He didn't have an answer. Words felt useless here, meaningless against beings that communicated with thoughts sharper than any sword. He could feel the others watching, their wings folding and unfolding in silent anticipation. One careless motion, and they could end him. Then the largest dragon exhaled, a controlled burst of plasma curling like liquid fire toward him. The boy dove instinctively, rolling across the jagged rock floor. The heat seared his clothes and singed his hair, but he survived. Heart hammering, he scrambled to his feet. The dragons watched, unmoved, as though his life, or death, was a game they were only beginning to enjoy. "You survived," one of the smaller dragons rumbled, its voice low and dangerous. "Many do not. Yet surviving is not enough. Courage is measured not by instinct alone." The boy's pulse raced. He had known instinct could only carry him so far. He needed more. He had no idea what more looked like in this alien world, but he forced himself to stand taller, meet the glowing gaze of the largest dragon. Something inside him, some ember long buried under years of abandonment, flared. "Then tell me," he thought, not aloud, because he knew the dragons could hear his fear, his doubt. "Tell me what I must do." The dragons circled him slowly, wings brushing the cavern walls, sending dust and debris into the air. The boy's eyes darted nervously, counting them, 7 in total, each more intimidating than the last. He could feel their power, their centuries of dominance, and yet, in their gaze, there was curiosity. A spark of something that hinted they weren't completely dismissive of him, yet. The test began. The largest dragon lowered a claw, sharp as obsidian, inches from the boy's shoulder. "Retrieve it," it commanded in thoughts that pressed against his mind. Without hesitation. Without fear. Without retreat. The boy's stomach dropped. The claw was massive, the slightest misstep could crush him instantly. Yet as he reached toward it, he realized hesitation would mean death, not just physically, but the loss of any chance to prove himself. He steeled his nerves, shaking hands reaching forward. When his fingers brushed the claw, a jolt of heat shot through him, burning like fire but not injuring him. He froze, staring at the dragon, waiting for the inevitable punishment. Instead, the dragon tilted its head, a faint ripple through its scales that might have been curiosity, or amusement. Another dragon stepped forward, wings folding to create a narrow passage across the cavern floor. At the far end, something glimmered in the shadows. The boy realized with a jolt that the next part of the test wasn't just survival, it was movement, bravery, and intuition. He had to cross the cavern under the watchful gaze of predators who could kill him in an instant, without faltering once. Step by trembling step, he advanced. The floor was uneven, shards of rock threatening to cut him. The heat from the dragon's plasma coils washed over him in waves, but he kept moving. Every instinct screamed to stop, to retreat, to collapse in the dirt, but he pressed forward, driven by some strange combination of fear and determination that felt alien even to himself. Finally, he reached the shimmer. It was a crystal, glowing faintly, almost imperceptibly against the darkness. He touched it, feeling a strange warmth seep into his hand. Immediately, the dragons shifted, a collective murmur of acknowledgement rippling through their thoughts. The boy had survived the fire, the claws, the heat, and the walk of judgment. He had passed their first test, not through brute strength, but through courage, focus, and instinct honed by years of surviving on the margins. The largest dragon bent low again, eyes burning. "You are not yet one of us," it intoned, "but you are interesting. Perhaps worthy." The boy exhaled, relief and disbelief washing over him. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged in a place that could have easily destroyed him. Yet the dragon's challenge was far from over. Somewhere deeper in the shadows, he knew, the real test waited, one that would decide if he could ever be more than just an orphan, one that would decide if he could lead. And as he looked into the eyes of the ancient beasts, he realized that to survive the next test, he would have to confront something far deadlier than fire, claws, or wings. The boy followed the dragons deeper into the jagged canyon, the air growing colder and heavier with every step. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, twisting like living things. The larger dragons moved silently around him, wings folding tightly against their sides, watching with the patience of predators who had witnessed millennia. Every rock he stepped on seemed to whisper warnings, and every gust of wind carried the faint, eerie scent of something ancient, something waiting. At the end of the canyon, the largest dragon halted, its glowing eyes fixed on a cavern mouth so wide and dark it seemed to swallow the light. "Enter," it commanded, voice resonating in his mind like a drumbeat through the bones. "Face what lies within. Survive, or perish." The boy hesitated. The shadows inside the cave shifted in ways that defied logic, shapes stretching and coiling in the faint glimmer of light from the canyon. The darkness was thick, almost tangible, pressing against him. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud and uneven, echoing in the hollow space. This was no ordinary test. This was something, far older, far deadlier than anything he had faced. He stepped in. One foot, then another, careful not to make a sound. The walls of the cave were slick and cold, and the farther he went, the more oppressive the darkness became. The faint glimmer of crystalline veins along the walls was the only guide, casting eerie reflections that made him doubt his own eyes. Shadows darted at the edges of his vision, making him flinch, but he pressed onward. Then he saw it. A massive silhouette crouched in the deepest corner of the cavern, nearly invisible in the dark. Its body was covered in black, jagged scales that seemed to drink in the light. Its eyes, two pools of molten amber, locked onto him, unblinking, piercing, assessing. He froze. The creature was enormous, far larger than any dragon he had seen so far, and the air around it seemed charged with lethal energy. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to flee, to abandon this foolish test of courage. But he didn't. Something in the creature's gaze was not purely predatory. There was curiosity there. A challenge. A question. It made the boy's heart pound, but also, strangely, it sparked a flicker of calm. He knew he couldn't fight it, couldn't outmuscle it, couldn't hide from it. The only way forward was understanding. He lowered himself to the ground slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. His hands shook, but he extended one, palm up, toward the creature. "I don't want to hurt you," he thought, not speaking aloud, but sending the thought like a ripple into the void. The creature's eyes narrowed, studying him. Its tail, thick as a tree trunk, twitched with subtle menace, yet it did not advance. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds, time seemed to stretch and twist. Then, the creature shifted, its massive head lowering to his level, nostrils flaring. Its hot breath washed over him, tinged with smoke and something metallic, almost like iron. He held his hand steady, feeling the weight of the moment pressed down like the sky itself. Finally, with a slow, deliberate motion, he touched its scales. The black, jagged surface was cold, almost smooth beneath his fingertips. The creature stiffened, a low, vibrating growl echoing through the cavern. Then, almost imperceptibly, it exhaled, a plume of heat and smoke that felt like acknowledgement. It had accepted him, or at least, it had decided he was not a threat. The boy's chest heaved with relief, but he didn't move. He knew better than to assume safety. Slowly, carefully, he allowed himself to inch closer, letting his hand glide along the creature's massive head. Its amber eyes never left him, but the tension in its body eased. Behind him, in the shadows near the cave's mouth, he felt the dragons watching. The largest dragon's eyes glowed with a mixture of shock and respect. The others murmured in low tones, wings shifting as if they, too, recognized the enormity of what had just happened. The boy had faced the deadliest creature in the cave, and had not only survived, but reached a connection that few, if any, could ever achieve. The boy finally pulled back, stepping away slowly, never breaking eye contact. The creature lowered itself, settling like a coiled guardian of the cavern, and let him pass. As he emerged back into the canyon, the dragons moved silently around him. For the first time, their expressions, if dragons could express, hinted at something like respect. The boy's legs wobbled, exhaustion and adrenaline mixing in a haze, but inside him, something had shifted. He was no longer just the orphan they had mocked. He had proven a courage and understanding that could not be ignored. And yet, the dragon's test was not complete. Beyond their eyes, beyond the canyon, lay the final challenge. Something that would demand more than bravery or intuition, something that would determine if the boy could truly lead them, or if all of this courage would be meaningless. The shadows of the cave seemed to follow him as he walked. Somewhere deep in the alien landscape, destiny waited, and it would not be denied. The boy stood at the edge of the cavern where the black-scaled creature waited, massive and still, its molten amber eyes fixed on him like twin suns burning through the shadows. He could feel the dragons behind him, hovering silently, wings folded but tense, as if even the slightest motion could shatter the fragile balance of this moment. The air was thick with expectation. The boy's palms were clammy, his breath shallow. Every nerve screamed that one wrong move could mean instant death. And yet, he didn't step back. Something inside him, a quiet, stubborn defiance, forged from years of being dismissed and abandoned, urged him forward. He reached out slowly. The creature's gaze followed, unblinking, assessing. Every scale along its jagged back shimmered faintly, reflecting the dim light from the cavern mouth. Its presence was overwhelming, powerful enough to crush mountains, ancient enough to have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. And yet, here he was, a mere boy, extending his hand toward it. He whispered a thought into the void, not words, not sounds, but the pulse of his intention. I mean no harm. I only wish to understand you. The creature shifted slightly, tilting its massive head. Its tail lashed lazily against the cavern floor, sending vibrations through the boy's feet. He froze, unsure whether this was approval or warning. But he held his ground. He would not flinch. Slowly, he lifted his hand, fingertips trembling, and touched the ridge of jagged scales along its snout. The creature flinched for a fraction of a second, a reflex, but then, astonishingly, it relaxed. A low rumble filled the cavern, not a growl, not a threat, but something deeper. Reverence. Recognition. The boy's heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline and fear merging with a strange, quiet triumph. He slid his hand along the creature's enormous head. The scales were surprisingly smooth beneath his fingers, warm in some places, cold in others, as if alive with some internal fire. The creature shifted closer, allowing the contact, leaning its immense head into him, not in aggression, but in acceptance. Behind him, the dragons stirred. Their wings unfolded slightly, creating gusts of wind that danced over the canyon floor. The largest dragon, the one who had first challenged him, lowered its head, its eyes glowing brighter, focused on the boy. You? Its thoughts echoed in his mind, reverberating with disbelief. You have done what no human has done in centuries. You have tamed the untamable. The boy's lips parted, but no words came. What could he say to creatures older than time itself? Instead, he stood firm, letting the silence speak, letting the fragile trust he had earned radiate outward. The deadliest creature on the planet had accepted him. And through that acceptance, the dragons could no longer deny his worth. A soft rumble rolled through the cavern. The black-scaled creature lowered itself fully to the ground, its massive body coiling in a gesture of calm. The boy dared a small smile, the first genuine expression of triumph in months, maybe years. He had been rejected, dismissed, mocked, yet here he was, alive, unbroken, and commanding the attention of the mightiest beings he had ever encountered. The dragons stepped closer. Their massive forms towered over him, but their postures were no longer threatening. They circled him slowly, wings brushing lightly against the canyon walls, eyes glowing with a newfound respect. The largest dragon inclined its head toward him, a silent acknowledgement of leadership, of courage, of wisdom far beyond mere survival. The boy exhaled, a mixture of relief, fear, and pride washing over him. He had faced death, stared into the eyes of the deadliest, and come through not by brute force, but by empathy, courage, and an understanding that few could ever hope to possess. And in that moment, something shifted. The boy was no longer the orphan cast aside, no longer the fragile human who had stumbled into the dragon's world by accident. He was a leader, a bridge between two worlds, human and dragon, small and colossal, fragile and unstoppable. The deadliest had accepted him. And so had they all. But even as relief surged through him, a quiet, unsettling thought lingered at the edge of his mind. This victory was only the beginning. Beyond the canyon, beyond the mountains, beyond even the dragons themselves, the world still held dangers and trials he could scarcely imagine. The next challenge would demand even more courage, more insight, more heart. Yet for now, he allowed himself a single, fleeting triumph. The boy who had been rejected, the boy who had been alone, had tamed the deadliest. And in doing so, he had become impossible to ignore. The canyon was silent now, save for the soft hum of wings and the boy's steady breath. The deadliest creature had settled beside him, a coiled sentinel, its amber eyes still glowing but calm, as though acknowledging the boy's presence as a new law of the world. The dragons circled slowly, wings brushing the canyon walls, each movement deliberate, majestic, and filled with a weight that made the boy's chest tighten. The largest dragon, scales shimmering like molten gold and crimson, lowered its massive head to the boy's level. Its gaze bore into him, not with the threat of before, but with something heavier, respect. You have faced fire, shadow, and the untamable, it rumbled through thought, vibrations rolling through the boy's mind. You have not faltered. You have not fled. You have proven yourself in ways no human ever has. You are worthy. The words, or the force of the dragon's thoughts, hit him with the weight of mountains. The boy's knees nearly buckled under the gravity of the moment. For a lifetime, he had been unseen, dismissed, rejected. And now, the beings who could have ended him in an instant, the titans who had mocked him, bowed, figuratively and in the language of their kind, to acknowledge him. Around him, the smaller dragons shifted their weight, wings folding, eyes glowing with a mixture of curiosity and reverence. Their growls and rumbles, once menacing, now sounded almost like approval. The boy felt the vibrations of their presence ripple through the ground, through his bones. He was not just alive. He was recognized. He was accepted. The boy took a tentative step forward. His gaze met the largest dragons again, and in that moment, an unspoken pact was made. He would lead, not as a tyrant, not as a master, but as one who understood, who could listen, who could act when others faltered. The dragon's loyalty was no longer earned through fear or dominance. It was earned through courage, empathy, and a connection that transcended species, size, and power. The deadliest creature stirred beside him, head rising to meet his. Its amber eyes locked on his own, and a low, vibrating hum rolled from deep within its throat, a sound the boy instinctively understood as acceptance, trust, even something like affection. He reached out again, touching the ridge of its scales, and felt a pulse of energy, strong, alive, and in rhythm with his own. In that instant, the boy realized he had changed. He was no longer the orphan wandering the wastelands, unnoticed and alone. He was a bridge between worlds, a human capable of commanding creatures that had existed long before humanity had even dreamed of the stars. He was small, yet he carried a presence that none could ignore. The dragons shifted again, a slow, synchronized movement that seemed ceremonial. They lowered their heads, wings outstretched, circling around him and the deadliest creature. The canyon echoed with the resonance of their combined voices, thoughts, feelings, and awareness merging into a symphony of approval. The boy stood at the center, heart pounding, every nerve alight with exhilaration and awe. Finally, the largest dragon extended a claw, brushing it lightly against the boy's shoulder, a gesture heavy with significance. Leader, it conveyed in thought, simple yet profound. You are ours, as we are yours. The boy exhaled, a long, shaky breath, a mixture of relief, pride, and something deeper, belonging. For the first time in his life, he was not alone. For the first time, he mattered in a way that could not be denied. He looked up at the sky, feeling the wind stir his hair, carrying dust and light from the canyon above. Somewhere beyond these mountains, the world awaited. Challenges, dangers, and adventures beyond imagining. But he no longer feared them. He would face them with courage. With insight. With allies unlike any human had ever known. And as the dragon's wings stretched wide, casting shadows across the canyon floor, the boy smiled. He had been rejected, dismissed, and overlooked. But now, he was respected, trusted, and unbreakable. The orphan had become a leader. The human had become something far greater than anyone, dragon or man, had ever expected. In the silence of that moment, the boy understood something simple and eternal. Power without understanding was nothing, but courage, empathy, and bravery, even in the smallest heart, could command the impossible. And in that truth, he was unstoppable. The canyon seemed to exhale with him. The dragons had accepted him. The deadliest had acknowledged him. And now, he could face the future with a strength no one could challenge, a presence no one could ignore. The orphan boy was no longer just a survivor. He was a legend in the making.